Welcome to the 3x5 news, views, and reviews. Scribble on index cards. We get in and we get out fast, so keep up. Well, the U.S. finally got its revenge for decades of attacks on our interests overseas by Iran and its terror-sowing proxy, as they call it, Hezbollah. The attacks began in 1979 with the embarrassing, not to mention Carter presidency ending, seizure of the U.S. Embassy in Iran and holding of 52 American hostages for 444 days. With our terminally short memories and lack of interest in history, many of us Americans might not even know that. Fewer still know that Hezbollah blew up a U.S. military barracks in Beirut, killing 241 American military, mostly Marines. That's right, 241. Then, from 1985 to 1991, the Hezbollah pulled off kidnappings in Lebanon, including of a CIA station chief named William Buckley, who they actually tortured and killed. That was followed by, in 1996, the bombing of the Khobar Towers in Nairobi, Kenya, killing 19 U.S. airmen and injuring 498 others, including Americans. More recently, Iran supported extensive and frequent attacks on U.S. troops in Iraq. So, you ask, why all the hating on the U.S. by Iran? As for the embassy seizure, it was sparked by President Jimmy Carter allowing the exiled Shah of Iran, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, who had been ousted in the Iranian Revolution, to seek cancer treatment in the U.S. I didn't follow current affairs closely then, but I remember thinking that was asking for trouble. I mean, you couldn't blame Iranians for thinking the U.S. might try to restore the Shah to power, because that is exactly what it did in 1953. Mohammad Mossadegh was the popular, democratically elected prime minister who nationalized, brought under government control, the British oil company, later known as BP. In response, MI6, the British Foreign Intelligence Agency, and the CIA engineered a coup which brought the Shah and his brutal secret police, the Savak, back to power. Then, during the Iran-Iraq War, the Reagan administration provided Iraq with intelligence that it used to kill tens of thousands of Iranian troops with chemical weapons. That's right. As for its nuclear weapons program, which Iran has been slow rolling for decades to avoid becoming a complete international pariah, it wanted a deterrent to keep the enemies that surrounded it, such as Israel and Saudi Arabia, not to mention U.S. military bases, from mounting an attack or invasion. But how did things go south between Persia, later Iran, and the Jews? Down through the centuries, Persians treated Jews, as did many countries, with a varying mixture of tolerance and tension. In the early days, Cyrus the Great welcomed them and they flourished. In subsequent eras, religious persecution reared its ugly head. In the 20th century, it was, ironically, the Shah who treated Jews as first-class citizens. That all ended with the Iranian Revolution, which at times tried to claim it was not anti-Jew, but just anti-Zionist. In fact, some Jews actually still live in Iran, a country of contradictions. Iran, true story, is also a haven for trans surgery. But what about Israel? Why did it develop nuclear weapons well before Iran? Though, of course, Iran has since become a justification for its nuclear weapons program continuing. At the time, Israel was not worried about Iran so much as the Arab states with which it had fought 3 wars. Israel secretly began its program in the mid to late 1950s with the help of the French. But why in secret? They feared it could have provoked an arms race in the Middle East or preemptive attacks. Israel's nuclear weapons program was up and running by 1967, and the following year, the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, or NPT, was open for signing. Going into effect 3 years later, the signees of the NPT, every nation except India, Pakistan, and, of course, Israel, committed themselves to keeping nations that hadn't already developed nuclear weapons from doing so, helping those countries develop nuclear energy for peaceful purposes and working toward nuclear disarmament. The latter, of course, was purely aspirational. Disarmament will never happen. Iran actually signed the NPT on the first day it was open for signatures. Considering the Iranian regime today, that seems uncharacteristic. Why did it do that? At the time, the Shah was tight with the U.S., which seldom met a dictator it didn't like. Okay, I exaggerate, but not by much. And I wanted nuclear energy partly for the status of being a modern state. After news of the attacks on Iran by Israel and the U.S., I initially found it disingenuous of commentators who maintained that Iran's program would rebound in months or a few years After all, Iran sustained massive damage. I mean, Fordo, the whole of the nuclear Mountain King, was blown up. That has got to be a game ender, if not a game changer, right? Turns out the latter, according to nuclear experts, but not in the right direction. Obliterating Fordo, as Trump claimed happened, didn't. That would have required waves of attacks with bunker busters, which cost a cool $3 million apiece. But centrifuges were likely removed in advance of the attacks, and despite scientists being killed, institutional knowledge remains. As nuclear expert James Axton wrote in the Times, quote, Iran probably retains highly enriched uranium, centrifuge components, and expertise, a triad that it will allow it to reconstitute its program rapidly. Worse, the attacks might have removed whatever reservations Iran still had about developing nuclear weapons. Many don't buy it, but Ayatollah Khamenei once issued a fatwa declaring nuclear weapons haram, that means verboten, and inhumane. Iran will likely withdraw from the NPT, which means there will no longer be impartial inspectors in the form of the International Atomic Energy inside Iran. They already kicked out its chief. Nuclear proliferation is like cancer. Tough to, again in Trump's words, obliterate, but it can be managed. Though with the inherent volatility of nuclear weapons system, complicated by the possible introduction of AI to the process, I would argue that nuclear deterrence has long passed its sell-by date. Nuclear weapons have become like a disease from which we are trying not to die before we succumb to something marginally less painful, such as global warming or, maybe, an AGI that gets ideas of its own. After all, of the various ways with which nuclear weapons can kill us, radiation sickness, starvation, and exposure from nuclear winter, the worst is the most painful and arguably our deepest fear, burning to death.